Welcome to Breaking Financial Chains, where we combine practical money guidance with emotional healing to help you break free from financial limitations. I'm Tanya Ibberson, your financial wingwoman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Breaking Financial Chains. In today's episode, we're going to talk about uncovering money trauma and identifying hidden financial triggers, which is quite often the result of trauma that we've experienced throughout our lives. Quite often money trauma can relate to things that we've experienced very early on in our lives. And the very nature of trauma means that it's not always something that's very easy to access. It's not always going to be something that is very pleasant to think about or work through. Our brains can be very, very clever in the way that it can help us to suppress and hide memories and things that have happened to us in order to make us feel a little bit safer. It's the feeling that we have around trauma that our bodies recognize, and that's when we get flooded with things like adrenaline and cortisol. And that's when we get that feeling of fight or flight. That's when we start to feel incredibly anxious. We feel like we might want to end the conversation that we're in at that point in time. We feel we might want to leave a room. We all of a sudden need to open the window for some air. Whatever it is that makes us feel, that's the impact of trauma. And I think one of the key things to say straight out from the beginning of this podcast is that trauma doesn't have to be dramatic to be valid. Learning about different types of trauma, I work with the lovely Caroline Strawson, and she talks about big T and little t. And the big traumas might be something absolutely horrific, like a bereavement, like a family being made redundant and ending up having to lose the family home. It could be a divorce between parents and then the impact that has on younger children. Or it might just be that we've not got as much food in the cupboard when we're getting towards the end of the month, or we remember that as a child. It might be not being able to have new shoes when they were needed, and we had to continue going to school with holes in the soles of our shoes or things like that. So it doesn't have to be a great, big, huge occurrence in our lives. Sometimes our reaction to trauma and where our financial triggers come from can be very small things that happen, but a repeated amount of time, a repeated going to the cash point and not having enough money in to draw the cash that you want. That there's a queue behind you at that cash point, and you feel as though every single person in that queue knows that you've not had enough money in your bank account to draw the cash that you wanted, which was the whole point of going to that cash point. So everything that we feel is absolutely valid. How you feel around money is absolutely valid. I quite often will speak to people and they'll say, I know it's really stupid, but I know this is absolutely ridiculous, but, and it's almost as though we want to preempt or protect ourselves a little bit because we feel that we're trying to dumb down our experiences and our feelings. No trauma, no feeling is insignificant or stupid or ridiculous, because it's how we feel. And therefore, it's really important to acknowledge that that's important because it's important to you. And money trauma often shows up in very sneaky and emotional ways. So we might have all of the tools. We might budget. We might check in with our accountant on a regular basis. We might religiously keep those money dates with ourselves and keep a track of all of our spending. The money trauma is not about spreadsheets and budgets. It's about the feeling. So if we sit down to do our money dates, but you need to open a bottle of wine to help you get through it because of how uncomfortable it makes you feel, then maybe that's something to explore a little bit more. Maybe that's something that you might want to have a conversation with somebody like me or a financial coach that can help you start to peel back the layers of what might be happening or why you feel so uncomfortable, that's something that you need to do. So what is money trauma? Well, emotional wounds that are connected to financial stress or instability would be the best way that I would describe what money trauma is. It often comes from childhood or formative experiences. And the reason that those are so powerful, particularly before the age of 7, is because our immature little brains can't distinguish between feelings and facts. They can't distinguish between dad's had a bad day, mum's had a bad day, and the fact that money actually is the root of all evil, or whatever those popular sayings that you might have grown up hearing from parents and grandparents and other family members. What we remember is how that bad mood that our parents were in made us feel. And it's the association that we then carry related to whatever was going on at the time. In the same way as it's not always about what happened, it's about how it makes us feel. Are we feeling powerless? Are we feeling unsafe? Are we feeling ashamed? Are we feeling as though this is something that I will never ever choose to repeat in all of the rest of my life? And if this is how money makes you feel, I'm going to make it my business to make sure I don't have any. Because that way I can't have somebody take it off me. Or that way I can't have it ruin my day. If we used to save money in our piggy banks and we used to put our birthday money or any money that we got from family members in our piggy banks as a child, but then perhaps a family member used to ask to borrow that money and then not give it back, that is going to be a very deep core memory that we're learning around. When I lend money to people, I don't get it back, especially if it's someone that you trust. And we might then go two different ways from that experience. We might then decide, you know what, that's my money. That's my piggy bank. I'm going to hide it. If I hide it, nobody can take it away from me. And we might start to get a little bit more protective of our money. We might start to worry about spending it, because that way, if we keep it all locked away somewhere really super safe, we're always going to have some, and we're always going to have that safety net. Or the alternative approach might be that instead of hoarding it and hiding it so no one can take it away from us, it might be that we felt really guilty doing that. If a family member said they needed to borrow some of the money out of my piggy bank and I promise I'll give it you back, we didn't feel that we could say no from a safety point of view while we're on that subject. So it might be that, do you know what, I'm going to let you take all of my money, and I'm going to make sure that there's no more money goes in that piggy bank, because if I don't have any in there, then there's nothing for anybody to take away from me. In the same way as children from a divorce might go two completely different ways. One might decide that, you know what, I can't bear to repeat the experience of what I've just watched my parents go through. I am going to make sure that I never, ever end up in a marriage. I'm never going to be in a stable relationship. I'm going to make it my business to make sure that whilst I'm quite happy to have some people around some of the time, I'm going to make sure that my behaviour dictates the fact that they might not want to stay with me very long. Or the alternative might be that we choose to, I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm on my own, because I don't like the way that feels, and therefore I might allow people to get away with more in a relationship, and I'm going to put up with more. Or I might go completely different again, and I might decide I'm not putting up with that from anybody, and I'm going to be completely self-sufficient, and I'm going to make sure I'm earning all my own money, and I'm never going to be reliant on another person for the rest of my life. All from the same experiences from the same family. But all of that comes from how it makes us feel. So what we want to be doing to try and gently and safely explore some of those things, to be able to identify what those triggers might be for yourself, is to notice avoidance as the first example. So, for example, if you need to check your bank accounts, so you've just gone to, this has happened to us this afternoon actually, we've gone shopping with our teenager because all of a sudden overnight, everything is too small. All of the trainers and shoes that she have hurts her feet, and we need to get her some shoes to be able to, go outside for the rest of the summer holiday. And we go to pay for the trainers in the shop, and the credit card declined. My first thought was, oh my God, we've overspent on the credit card this month. And we're really, really careful on what goes on the credit card. the balance is paid off at the end of each month. We don't allow any interest to be added onto that account. It's used mostly for things like essentials and shopping and food and fuel. My husband checked the app, and you need to use the PIN number on the credit card for every so many transactions. It didn't tell us that in the shop. It wasn't suggested in the shop, so he just used a different card. But there's still that instant, I thought, oh my God, we've spent all the money on the credit card. He just picked a different credit card out of his wallet and thought I'd just look at that later. We both experienced very different feelings in that moment of, oh, I'm so sorry, that payment hasn't gone through. Can you try again? Panic when checking bank accounts, panic when checking credit card apps, panic at the thought of opening bank statements. If people are still getting paper bank statements, are you actually opening those envelopes? Have you switched off the paper bank statement function on your bank account in order that you don't have to go through that trauma of having a look at what's going in and out of your bank account? Noticing that it's something that you're specifically avoiding, because knowledge is power and we can have more choices if we know what we're dealing with. So looking at your bank account is a really important and smart thing to do from a financial empowerment point of view. But if you're noticing panic at the thought of checking your bank accounts, well, that's a trigger. That's something that's reminding your brain or your body and the feelings that you're then experiencing of something that you've experienced in the past, and your brain is making you want to run for the hills rather than opening those bank statements. This is absolutely not safe. I felt this feeling before. What you need to do is run, or go and defrost the freezer, or go for a really long walk, or go and hit the gym, or whatever it might be, whatever avoidance tactics you employ to be able to keep you safe from those situations. Another hidden trigger to look for is guilt after spending, especially if you're spending on yourself. What's going on there? Noticing that little prickly feeling that you might have, or looking at the receipts and starting to question if it was the right decision. And that's certainly something that I experienced a lot of from a story that I uncovered about 5 years ago in relation to buying a bouncy ball with my mum's last pound at the time. And if you don't know that story, go back and listen to that episode, because I share in there how this seemingly unintended lesson of trying to make sure I'm not overspending as a child actually resulted in me feeling as though I can't be trusted with money, and I don't deserve to buy things for myself. So sometimes a well-meaning comment or lesson that parents and loved ones give us are received completely differently. And it's interesting, when we notice that, we can then do something about it. We can then make a change. As adults, we can do the work to rewire that memory so that we could start to process those feelings that we haven't processed from an earlier age. Trauma quite often it's almost like the aftermath or the feelings that we're left with, because all of a sudden we become that 7-year-old person again when we first felt that feeling when something happened around spending of money. Maybe we weren't 7, maybe we were 5, maybe we were 3 years, or whatever it might be. When we experience trauma, our brains don't timestamp that experience, and our brains remember the feeling. So it could be 30, 40, 50 years time difference between those two experiences. And the brain will instantly remember the feeling and direct you to the safe patterns of behavior. So it takes a lot of strength and planning to be able to divert intentionally and say, absolutely not, this is something that I don't want to repeat anymore. And it starts with noticing those hidden triggers. It starts with noticing when we're starting to feel off. Avoiding making financial decisions out of fear is another really big one. Delegating to somebody that really bad shouldn't have that power to make that decision for you, because we feel, "Oh, I'm no good with money. I don't want to make that decision. I want somebody else to take care of that for me. I don't want to take that responsibility because," well, because what? Why? What might happen if you take control and make a financial decision? What if it is wrong? Well, maybe that needs to become part of your decision-making process. What might the outcome be if I go down route A as opposed to route B? Is there somebody impartial that I can speak to, like a financial coach, me, the financial woman, or somebody else close to you that you can say, I'm looking at purchasing some life insurance, or I'm looking at paying for private medical insurance, and I just have got no idea where to start. Can I run through these options with you just to help you to perhaps see a clear way through making that decision? Experiencing emotional reactions to money conversations with others is so common. So it might be having a few drinks with friends down the pub. It might be sitting in the garden. It might be sitting having a coffee with family members, and people start to talk about how much they've spent on a new car or holidays that they're having or home improvements or extensions. And if that's something that you'd rather go and get another round of drinks in for everybody than stay for that conversation, maybe that's something that you want to note down mentally. That's really interesting. I would rather go and stand outside and watch traffic than stay in this conversation. Why? And so what? What happens if you say, what happens if you make yourself get involved or hold part of that conversation or even just sit and listen? What's the worst thing that can happen? Although that's not the ideal turn of phrase that I would use to someone when you're dealing with something that potentially might be traumatic. But ultimately, the experience that you have now as an adult will be very different to the experience that you might have had when forming those core memories. So noticing that it's something that you're struggling with and perhaps taking that to the table as part of a conversation started with someone that actually can help you work through those triggers. So examples from real life of where we might either that sort of the behaviors that come out of having those money triggers, but then not dealing with them. If we avoid them altogether and we just continue on our merry way, well, that might result in overspending, for example, in order to avoid conflict with others. That might be the example where you go on a group outing and everybody around the table has ordered all different things off the menu, and somebody trying to be helpful or in their wisdom or following what you've always done before decides we're just going to split the bill 10 ways and everybody's going to pay 1/10 of the bill, when in actual fact some people had steak and a bottle of wine and you might have had something that's a lot less. You might have just had the chicken and a soft drink because you're driving. Well, then that's not a fair split of the cost of that bill, but you don't feel comfortable standing up and going, actually, I'm not paying for wine and steak. I'm just going to pay for my meal if that's okay with you. Being able to speak up without the fear of what the consequences might be because of a memory or a feeling that we have and just feeling so uncomfortable, we'd rather just go along with what everybody else is doing. Then speak up and advocate for yourself. It also might show up as hoarding savings. So with the examples that we talked about earlier on in terms of money perhaps being taken away from us when we're younger, perhaps feeling guilty around spending any of it, that's an example in real life of where we could say, oh my goodness, there might be some of you out there listening to this now and saying, oh my goodness, I do that. And I'd like to see the savings grow, and it makes me feel physically sick if the balance in that account goes below a certain amount. That's something to notice. That's something to perhaps safely explore in safe hands. Undercharging in business is a big one. And this was one of the outcomes that happened for me when I had built up the belief that I don't deserve to buy things for myself and I make bad decisions with money. That showed up for me when I was, I've been self-employed for over 15 years now. But it made it very, very difficult for me to not overgive within the pricing structure that I was providing for clients. And also it made it really difficult for me to chase debts. People hadn't paid me. I felt so incredibly uncomfortable to send an email, to make a phone call to say, the invoice for the work I've done for you is so outstanding. When can I expect payment? Which, saying it now over here, talking to you on this podcast, it just seems like the most sensible thing in the world. And I help clients do that all the time. But the feeling it used to give me at the thought of me needing to have that conversation with my clients because that money was to come to me was something that I just wasn't prepared to face. And when we uncover where those memories come from that cause that belief, we can then do a little bit of work to rewire that belief. Is that belief actually true? Am I actually no good with money? Are you actually no good with money? Or is that just something that you're telling yourself? feeling bad with money. So this is a good example for the one that I've just given you. Even if you're earning well, so feeling that you're no good with money, that you can't make financial decisions, that you don't want to be in charge of choosing which car you're going to buy because you just feel like you make bad decisions all of the time, noticing that those feelings are coming up. They can stem from childhood patterns. They can stem from something that we've overheard. So they're not necessarily going to be something that we've created for ourselves. These can be inherited beliefs. Growing up hearing we can't afford that. Growing up hearing that we can't afford a holiday. We can't afford to buy certain labels of clothing, and we're going to go and buy our clothes from a cheaper outlet instead. So this would be an example of a scarcity mindset, particularly if we're earning well. But because we've grown up and learnt that the stock response to I need to buy new things is we can't afford it, then that's going to make us feel very uncomfortable. Growing up in a childhood where there was a lot of financial chaos or instability at home, I've worked with people that have got a lot of very vivid and stark experiences of bailiffs coming to the door. We used to have the insurance man come to the door to collect his payments on a regular basis, and he just used to walk around the back of the house. So when we used to hide from the front door and hide behind the sofa because my mum didn't have any money to be able to make those payments that particular day, we'd just come round the back and the back door was wide open and he'd see us hiding and giggling because he had a completely different vantage point. But sometimes that can be bailiffs that are coming to the house because payments haven't been made. Sometimes that can be repossession of a home because payments haven't been made. And to be stuck in that situation as a child, it can be incredibly traumatic. So that is a very dramatic example. And not that there's I suppose there is a sliding scale, but not to say that one is worse or better than the other. That people have different experiences, and we're bringing our own experiences to the table, and we carry those with us throughout our lives. Another example, which is something that's very close to my heart and is something that I particularly work with people on, is money being used as a source of control, shame, or secrecy. If we've witnessed that or experienced the fallout from looking at what happens in a family home, or where you see what actually happens when that is pushed onto somebody, on your mom or a family member, that can be incredibly scarring from a childhood point of view. So being able to be brave and have those conversations and share and process, quite often because we haven't got the emotional maturity to be able to process some of the things that might have happened, particularly if they're traumatic from our childhood, then we're not going to be able to move on. We're not going to be able to acknowledge that is something that happened in the past and likely might not happen again. That we can make different decisions now, and that we can put different mechanisms in place to protect ourselves to make sure that we're not in that situation again. So some ways that we can start to identify what the triggers are for you is to start working on what I like to call a money timeline. And you might have heard of these already, where you sort of sit down either with a notebook or with Post-it notes, or I've done this myself many, many times on a spreadsheet because I can use a spreadsheet because I like that I can reorder those memories if I realize that they're in the wrong date order, which is why the Post-it notes are great. But sort of starting to jot down and journal around your earliest money memories. Not necessarily all just the bad things. We can journal around good money memories as well, but noticing who was involved in those conversations, who were involved in those experiences. How did it make you feel? Was it on the female side of your family, or was it on the male side of the family? Where are the patterns that are starting to show up? You do this with help. You can have a go at doing this on your own. I think it's super important to champion yourself to believe that you can work through these experiences of your own. You can explore the memories that you carry from your childhood by reading a book, by journaling, and then perhaps asking for help when you really feel that you've got to a bit of a block or you're completely stuck. Noticing where you feel resistance is quite often the most enlightening part of any of these exercises. Noticing where you're feeling, actually, I'm not doing that. Thank you very much. That feels a little bit too uncomfortable for me. Right. That needs a big asterisk by it. And maybe that's the point where you need to have done all of these money tasks, but I need a little bit of a help with this one from somebody because I'm feeling a lot of resistance. And I think there's something quite that I really do need to work through in there. And I'm not feeling able or comfortable to be able to do that on my own. Tracking emotions, not just the numbers. A little bit like tracking hormones, for example, around your cycle, or tracking moods around different times of the month. The way we feel, as we've already talked about in relation to trauma, is absolutely everything. So tracking those feelings around money decisions, around different times of the month when money comes in and money goes out, can be really enlightening to be able to identify where those patterns are. Maybe you start off with just doing it for a few days or a week to begin with, noticing where we're starting to feel a little bit pulled down. Are we getting stuck in the weeds and worrying? Are we waking up in the middle of the night? And can we link that to some level of financial anxiety? And all the while working through each of these prompts, asking yourself, what's the story I'm telling myself here? What story am I feeding myself? Is it true? Is it serving me? And what can I do differently to be able to change the outcome? I think it's super, super important and really clear to me that nobody is broken. You are not broken. When you're starting to identify what these things are that might be holding you back, whether that's trauma or other experiences, one of the first things that people often will say to me is, especially once they've worked through it and things are resolved and they feel so much better, is almost frustration or even anger around, I can't believe I've left this so long before actually dealing with it, to actually do something with it. I mean, that sort of energy serves nobody. You are not broken. You are ready to deal with anything that you have in your path at the right time. And this is clearly the right time for you to be listening to this podcast. This is clearly the time for you to be making notes and deciding that you actually want to take some time to work on yourself. You've been shaped to where you are right now. And if we're wanting to make conscious and intentional changes, you get to reshape. It's like plasticine. There's nothing saying that everything is set in stone. You have to stay the way that you've always been. You get to make those changes. We all get to make those changes. And it starts with the first step around awareness and noticing the feelings and deciding, do you know what, this might be uncomfortable, but I want to make a change and I want to do something about it. This work isn't about blame. It's about awareness and choice. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Financial Chains. Remember, you have the power to transform your relationship with money one step at a time. If this episode helped you, please subscribe and leave a review to help others find their path to financial freedom. I'm Tanya, your financial wing woman, and I'll see you next week.